CloudPod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, Google, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
and Peter.
Episode 48, recorded on November 20th, 2019. Import existing resources into the CloudPod. Good evening, you guys. How's it going?
Spectacular.
We are here the week before Thanksgiving, and that means we're only 2 weeks out from Reinvent. So that is getting time to get packing the bags and getting prepared. My liver is on calisthenic workouts to prepare for the activities.
Yeah, I'll be in Kansas City for a week, so that'll help me get ready for the game.
Indeed.
Nothing says preparation for fun like Kansas City.
Yeah.
It just makes you're that much more excited about the fun. Well, Jonathan, you have a follow-up for us today. From our last episode, we talked about Redshift. You want to let us know what you've learned?
Yeah, we talked about the origins of Redshift, and I did my digging, and I found out that it was actually originally based on Postgres 8.0.2, but it's largely been kind of re-engineered and optimized for large data sets and complex queries only. They've stripped out tons of stuff from the execution engine, and they replaced the storage engine with an interesting way of kind of remapping what looks like kind of row-based storage on to the consumer to a columnar storage system on the back end, which is pretty cool. So it helps improve performance and gives much better compression ratios, so less cost for SSD.
Well, that's fantastic. I was also right when I said that it was owned by another company. It was owned by ParAccel at one point.
Yep.
And they no longer exist as a company. They were bought by Actian, and then I don't know what's happened to them. So I'm glad to hear that Amazon's made it much better than it was many, many years ago. Well, moving on to topics this week, we have a ton of news with KubeCon and everyone dumping stories for Reinvent. We have a ton of news to get through tonight, so we are going to get to it. The first general news story, though, is a container shakeup. Docker has sold their enterprise business to Mirantis and appointed a new CEO. The selling off of the enterprise business to Mirantis is part of a shakeup that will see Scott Johnson, the former head of product, take over the reins as chief executive officer. Docker CEO Rob Bearden, at least exiting CEO Rob Bearden, said, "We determined that Docker had two very distinct and different businesses, one an active developer business and the other a growing enterprise business. We also found that the product and the financial models were vastly different. This led to the decision to restructure the company and separate the two businesses, which is the best thing for customers and to enable Docker's industry-leading technology to thrive." So the company's roadmap will now support the Docker desktop, its local coding tool for building containerized apps, in the Docker Hub marketplace for ready-to-made app components. Mirantis will be taking over the Docker Enterprise product, or what's left of Swarm, and integrate with Mirantis Cloud Platform, which helps enterprises deploy and run Kubernetes on-premise hardware. The company also plans to offer a managed version of this in the future. And Docker and Mirantis will continue to collaborate to maintain their integration between their solutions. So this is a pretty big, sad time for Docker community, but something I'm not entirely surprised to see.
Yeah, I wonder if many of the other sort of open source products will end up splitting their sort of open source development effort and their enterprise efforts for the same reasons. Yeah, I'm not surprised. They haven't been profitable, so it's pretty...
I mean, they made a pretty bad bet on Docker Swarm. I mean, I think that was a mistake when it was very clear at that point even that Kubernetes was going to become the dominant player in the orchestration wars. So it's too bad, but I'm glad to see Docker as an entity will maybe continue to live. Maybe it can get some of its mind share back, because things like Red Hat have just stripped out the Docker native runtimes and moved to more open source runtimes. So I think Docker in general has been losing market share not only on the open source side but also on the enterprise side. So,
is there a business model? What is the business model now moving forward for Docker without their enterprise product suite?
I assume that they might start charging for some of their Docker Hub capabilities. I think that's where they might be able to make money, particularly if they make a Docker Hub for enterprise product or something else that make it a little bit more restricted. But I don't think they would be wise to start charging for the Docker desktop. Yeah. I think that would be a really bad choice on their part if they want to continue to be relevant in the space.
Presumably they could also still provide professional services.
Yeah, good point. That's the original model that I always loved.
Well, as I'm sure to no surprise to either of you, Amazon is officially protesting the Pentagon's cloud contract awarding to Azure, citing an unmistakable bias. This is filed paperwork with the U.S. Courts of Federal Claims regarding its legal protest last Friday, and Andy Jassy held an all-hands where he stated plans to protest the decision and push the government to shine a light on what really happened. Apparently, he continued to allude to political pressure from Donald Trump, who has had a long-time beef with Amazon.com CEO Jeff Bezos, And there's a comment here from Jassy. I think when you have a sitting president who's willing to publicly show his disdain for a company and the leader of a company, it's very difficult for government agencies, including the DoD, to make an objective decision without fear of reprisal. Although it's unlikely they will win the appeal, it does have a few things in its favor. Amazon does, including the initial expectations to win, and it already earned the trust and respect of Jedi management. So we'll see where this one goes. What do you guys think?
I don't know why they're unlikely to win. I think if the paper trail is there to show that there was interference, and there most likely is, then they should stand a good chance of getting the decision reversed.
It depends if, what merits and what reasoning they felt that it was going to Azure or AWS. And, if there was direct manipulation by the POTUS in this particular situation, then maybe there's something there. But at the end of the day, the DoD has to make a decision. And if they have enough evidence that Azure is a good choice, then they might be able to fight it. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be evidence, though. There can't be
I'm
this
sure there is.
Concept. Well, if there is, then it's an open and shut case. But there's got to be evidence, even if Jeff is right on from a reality standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know many people who even imagined that Azure had a chance to win that, really.
I mean, there was definitely people, we had talked about it here on the show a few times, where people were claiming they thought Azure had a good shot at it. And I think we talked about it. I think even at one point I was kind of thinking maybe Azure had a shot, and then it seemed very clear that they didn't, and so I stopped talking about it. But, here we are, a year later.
I suppose, yes, it's taken this sweet time. I suppose Microsoft have been around for a long time, and they're potentially seen as more enterprise friendly. But I mean, tech-wise, AWS Cloud is far superior.
I totally agree. Well, moving on to things that aren't superior. AWS has added some capabilities to CloudFormation, which of course inferior to Terraform. They have added the ability to import existing resources into a CloudFormation stack. CloudFormation, of course, has been the long-standing IAC language, or infrastructure as code language, of the AWS Cloud. Originally supporting JSON as a way to define your infrastructure as code, they later adopted YAML, change sets, and drift detection. But now they're making it even easier to import existing records into your CloudFormation code. Import existing resources allows you to create a new stack with imported resources, import those existing resources into an already created stack, migrate resources between stacks, or remediate drift detection and refactor nested stacks by deleting child stacks from one parent and importing them into another parent stack. Simple to add resources to an existing stack or create a new stack based off the resources. In the new file, you add a resource is for imported, an imported bucket, and then it will retain its information as you go through the process. So this is interesting. I tried to go use it, actually, because I was curious how it would work, and then I realized that I still had to write a bunch of YAML code or JSON code that I would have to define what I wanted imported, and then it would do its magic. And I lost interest because all my code's already in Terraform. But this is nice for people who didn't potentially inherit an infrastructure that has resources. But what wasn't clear to me is that once I import it, does it actually convert it to be native CloudFormation code, and so I can download that and modify it, or if it just means I've imported into my CloudFormation so I can reference it, but I don't actually get to use it or change it in CloudFormation in the future. It was a little bit unclear.
I think you have to have the object defined in the CloudFormation template, but then you sort of associate an existing resource with the object in CloudFormation, and so then it sort of assumes ownership of that going forward, which is great because things happen. Occasionally you deprovision things or have to fix things manually and they don't quite match up anymore. And previously it was a case of you have to take down the entire stack and redeploy the entire stack once you've got orphaned resources. So at least now you at least have the opportunity to keep on managing things with CloudFormation instead of pretending that template never existed and just doing things manually.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how Terraform works today with importing resources. And it's hugely convenient, especially when like a resource gets spun up in with another method, and then you really don't want to have to destroy it and recreate it just to get it under control of your Terraform state. So it makes a ton of sense, and it was a huge blocker. I still am a fan of Terraform over CloudFormation, but this was like a showstopper for CloudFormation, not being able to import resources.
Yeah, especially, I mean, I still have this mental block over CloudFormation and child-parent relationship stacks from many years ago. But the fact that you can now detach child stacks and then reattach them to something else is amazing. I still won't use it, but it's amazing. It's a day late and $1 short.
Yeah, really.
Our friend of the show, Ian McKay, who was on in the past and talked about Former 2, has day one support for this feature for you guys as well. So if you have used Former 2 in any way, he does support the ability to import existing resources into CloudFormation. So he can actually help simplify some of that logic that Jonathan was talking about, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, excellent.
So this is next story. The AWS Data Exchange allows you to find, subscribe to, and use data products. I actually had thought about building this as a startup about 10 years ago, and then I never did because I didn't know how to monetize it properly. But apparently AWS has figured it out. And so basically what this service is allows many companies use data internally, but many generate and then sell that data set with the general public or within their industry. Some initial support for this was added in 2008 with the launch of the AWS Public Dataset. But that effort then evolved into the Registry of Open Data on AWS, which currently contains over 118 interesting data sets. We talked about a few of them here on the show, with more added all the time. And so today they're making the next step available, which is the AWS Data Exchange. This addition to AWS Marketplace contains over 1,000 licensable data products from over 80 data providers. This diverse catalog of free and paid offerings in categories such as financial services, health and life sciences, geospatial, weather, and mapping data. And you can search for data sets via free or paid offerings. Example of a great paid one is the Pitney Bowes +4 database, which you can use to then import into a DynamoDB table and use in your e-commerce website, for example, etc. The data providers can update the data regularly, and it will send a CloudWatch event each time a product is updated. And if you're subscribed, you can then pull down the latest set of the data via Lambda function or other method. So pretty nice for those who are doing something with data sets that are publicly available.
It's awesome, really. If you think about it, like the democratization of knowledge goes back a very long time. And I think the printing press was probably the last big innovation when it came to getting information out to the common people, not just the elite class. And so being able to publish information either for free or for a small price is amazing. It's going to totally change the landscape, I think.
Continuous delivery of container applications is now available for Fargate with GitHub Actions. AWS has open sourced 4 new GitHub Actions, both for ECS and ECR capabilities. The 4 new open source GitHub Actions are Configure AWS Credentials, Amazon ECR Login, Amazon ECS Render Task Definition, and Amazon ECS Deploy Task Definition. In addition, they included a starter workflow in the GitHub Marketplace, which you can use to customize and build upon as required to stitch these 4 steps together to build a completely independent GitHub deployment model for your containers. So this is pretty nice.
Yeah, I did. This is my first time I saw this come out. I've got a customer right now we're working with who's on GitHub Actions and using ECS. So I can't wait to download them.
I'm really looking forward to the next round of Actions integrations because this is clearly going to continue. It would be nice to get the EKS integration as well.
I assume it's coming next.
Lambda integration, all these other things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think you'll start seeing GitHub Actions increase in pace now that it's generally available. I think that was the big blocker to companies really building these out. But they did GA that, I think, last week or the week before. So this is now available to everybody who's using GitHub.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the CloudPod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
Well, that's it for AWS. Let's move on to reinvent tips and tricks for the sessions. Last week we talked about a couple different areas, but this week we're going to talk about attending sessions, some of the parties, and then the replay party, which is the party of the week. So what are you guys' tips and tricks to try to get into sessions? So first, if you have not been to the session catalog, you are already behind on this one, because you did need to register for sessions a while ago. But you can get on wait lists for these sessions if you didn't have a chance to get a coveted reserved seat. But this is really going to be for those people who did not get those reserved seats. So what are your tips and tricks, Peter, to get into a session that you're super passionate about?
Wait in line. Almost all of them, I found there's enough room if you get there with a decent amount ahead of time that you'll get in the session. And if you're already on the list, make sure you show up in time because they don't hold your seat for very long.
People should realize that the reserved seating is only a portion of the total seats in the room, so they do hold back some spaces for kind of walk-ups at the last minute. So don't be demotivated if you didn't get into a session. You stand a good chance if you get there early enough.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the key thing is, get there early if you have a really big passion about getting into a session, and you can probably make your way in. The other trick that I've learned is if you don't make it in time to wait in line and they've already let the people in and they say it's full, if you kind of wait outside for a little while, typically people will go to a session and maybe it's not what they're looking for or something they didn't quite expect, or it's not the right level for them, and they'll leave within the first 10 minutes. And so if you don't mind missing some of the introductory topic part of it, you can also normally get in as a late attendee as well. So it's something to keep in mind. Don't get too discouraged when you get turned away at the door.
It's like scalping a Giants ticket in the second inning.
Indeed.
After all the fans are left. Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on to our next tip for parties. So, of course, there's a ton of events going on throughout the event. There's the pub crawl. There's the Tatonga challenge. There's the Sunday night live event at midnight, where the very first party of the reInvent. But there's also a wide range of other parties out there. What do you guys have to suggest on parties?
Ooh, yeah, the pub crawl, I think, has gotten so big. It's no longer a crawl because the lines are so long. I think what I would say, at least for the pub crawl, would be do your homework ahead of time, know which venue you enjoy the most, and just get there really early and get in line before it even starts. And then you get in, you be in the right place, and then don't try to crawl to other places. Just make it more of a pub stay than a pub crawl.
Yeah, I agree. I did the pub crawl one time, and I spent a lot of time traveling and waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no fun. So yeah, I kind of steer against that, I think, and I agree. Kind of get there early and find a good place to camp out with some good food and drinks and things, and don't forget though that they are sales funnels, and you're going to have to talk to people, and maybe it's a good thing.
The pub crawl is a little bit less salesy. I mean, they are sort of salesy, but you definitely don't get as much harassment from the pub crawl in my experience. But definitely something that's out there.
Yeah, I think parties in general are typically like.
Yes, parties for sure.
Yeah.
Another tip for the pub crawl: they can't serve shots at the bar, but you can order your drink neat, which is pretty much a shot, and they'll serve it to you.
Huh, that's interesting.
If you want a shot, yeah.
I typically have always chosen hotels that are on the bars that are on the ends of the venues. So I noticed that if you kind of pick one of the ones that's on either end of the venue, that it has less traffic. And so that's my recommendation on the party for the pub crawl, is definitely check that out. We will probably be at a pub. We have not decided which one it will be, but if you do follow our Twitter handle, the CloudPod1, or Jonathan, Peter, or I on Twitter, we will mention where we're going to be at which pub when we make that decision sometime in the next week. If you want to check out us, we'll be there at one of the pubs. We'll kind of camp out, is taking that tip in advice. The other tip on parties, there is a website called conferenceparties.com/reinvent2019. They will give you a list of all of the vendor parties. Like Jonathan mentioned, these are marketing events to try to get your name and information, but they are fantastic. If you're looking for a party on any day of the week, there's pretty much an option for you at any time. So definitely check that out. You can actually make it through all of reInvent without buying a single drink if you plan your schedule correctly. All right, then of course the big party of the week is the replay party. What are you guys' tips and tricks for replay?
Well, I don't know anybody else, but I really only go for the replay party. It's the highlight of the week for sure.
Awesome.
It's been. I mean, if it wasn't for the replay party, I think I'd be less inclined to go, because it's been such a good event and really well orchestrated. I mean, feeding and sort of watering tens of thousands of people, and the music's been great, and the fun events have been great. I kind of assume they're going to do a similar thing to the last couple of years, where they've had big tents and they've had games and activities to do, as well as just the regular dancing, the Skrillex of the dance music. So there's often lines for those things, so get there on time. It's all great fun.
Again, this year they're going to do it at the Las Vegas Festival Grounds, which is down by the former Sahara Hotel. So they will be offering free shuttles. You can also pick up a Lyft or get a Lyft or Uber ride to there. That's my recommended way to get there. But that they do, of course, have some restrictions on backpacks and large bags. So make sure you drop those things off at the hotel in advance. And I do recommend finding a good spot. If you're into t-shirts and free t-shirts, the replay party t-shirts typically go very, very quickly. And so if that is one of your highlights of your thing is get a replay party shirt, get there when the gates open, or as you will not get them otherwise.
Yeah, and I think one of the tips I would give is whoever you're going to plan on seeing at the reInvent party, go to the party with them because it's pretty big.
Yeah, it's pretty much impossible to try to Marco Polo through the party.
Yeah. I'm by the bar. Which bar? I'm by the one with that looks just like X, Y, and Z. Which one that looks like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so last year they had it was the first year they had a different act than just the Skrillex on the main stage. They had a band in the other room. And so I'm assuming they're going to do that again this year too. So if you're not into the electronica music, which is a staple of the replay party, I bet they will have some alternative options for you again this year. So do take advantage of those. The other thing on that venue, there is one bathroom that is in a building, and that one always has the longest line of all of the bathrooms. Normally, on the right side of one of the tents, there is a large number of porta potties, and that is a much faster path if you're looking for a bathroom, as the line is not quite as long there because people don't see it because it's kind of in the dark.
We just wanted to mention for people who haven't been to Vegas before, especially, it is in the desert and it does get cold at night. So
especially in December.
Especially in December, for sure. Yeah. So as much as you want to go in your t-shirt because it's a little warmer earlier in the day, and maybe have a couple of drinks or something, it is chilly. In fact, it is quite frigid by the time midnight rolls around. So at least take something to stay warm.
That being said, if you're in the big tent with Skrillex or the big act, it is pretty warm. There's a lot of bodies in those spaces, lots of lights and lasers and things that generate a lot of heat. So do keep that in mind too.
Lasers, I love lasers.
So maybe layers. I'd recommend layers.
Yes.
Layer and then be able to change as you need to. But of course, you can't take a backpack, so you have to work that out. But, all right, good. Well, that's awesome. Thanks for those tips, guys. I'm sure people going to reInvent will love those. Moving on to Google. Google has launched a new service for monitoring multi-cloud networks. This new service is aimed at helping customers using multiple cloud providers get a better handle on the network operations. These features include the Network Intelligence Center, which is supposed to deliver predictive and proactive healing around network failures driven by AI and ML. Comprehensive network monitoring verification optimization platform that spans both clouds and on-premise data centers. And the services around this include the network topology service, the performance dashboard, and the firewall metrics and insights capabilities, all there to help you secure and manage your cloud environments.
How kind of them.
Yeah.
To provide a way to report on other people's performance, other cloud's performance. It's kind of cool to have network topology. I'd like to think that you knew what it was going to be before you deployed it, but often that's not always the case. So not the people who want to see the topology aren't the people who designed it necessarily. But it's more information is always good.
That's an area where people are not always certain what they have deployed, especially when things have grown organically. And to have an easy way to go just sort of get that snapshot, especially if you can visualize it, which was always a huge issue with AWS for us, and visualizing security group rules and network topologies was always challenging.
But there's so much information. You potentially got NACLs, you've got route tables, different availability zones, VPNs, peering. That's just the Amazon stuff. You have the parallels in Azure, and you have the parallels in the Google Cloud. So much information. How do you visualize that in a way which is like digestible, or even sort of even sensible to look at?
Yeah, it does get tough. When I mean, obviously you want to filter it down. We've done it a few different ways. We've filtered by VPC. We filtered by tags. And tags make it pretty easy to go through and actually select certain target type environments to limit. Otherwise, you end up with something that literally looks like your wiring closet back in the day when we had Cat 6500s and hundreds of servers and a mess of Ethernet cables. But yeah, I mean, I think what we've done is we've basically built a bunch of different ways to filter that out so you can eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Oh, that's cool. I did laugh when I saw network topology because I think one of the first things I did as a rookie IT person was trying to map out the network of HP switches with HP OpenView or some equally crappy
OpenView. I remember OpenView.
And so that's going back like 20 years. So I guess we still seemingly have the same problems as we've always had. So
that's because it's always the network, Jonathan. Always the network. Well, the reason why Google might have wanted to create a network topology and connectivity testing tool is because apparently They made the biggest gains in the ThousandEyes report on public cloud network performance. Network intelligence company ThousandEyes, of course, today released the findings of its second annual study of major public cloud infrastructure providers' network performance. They're apparently uniquely positioned to provide this data because they have agents that they deploy to all of the cloud environments and then do some type of testing of it. The sensors can also be deployed in companies' enterprises, and so they get a good mapping of both enterprise connectivity to the clouds as well as from the clouds themselves. And the most surprising finding from the reports is that Amazon's network provides lower performance predictability than both Microsoft and Google, despite its status as the world's leading public cloud platform. The main issue with Amazon, of course, is its heavy reliance on the public internet for delivering network traffic, rather than its own infrastructure like Google and Microsoft. Amazon does provide its own network through the Global Accelerator, but ThousandEyes pointed out that it does not always perform faster than the internet, or the results are negligible in many cases. However, they did show lower latency and better performance than a year ago. Azure improved 29.2% in performance predictability over the last year, and Google had the best improvement with a 36.4% improvement. IBM and Alibaba were also ranked. IBM apparently was comparable to the big three, but they were not reviewed last year. So they can't compare them. And Alibaba also had a comparable with a few notable exceptions in the US. So,
did you download the report from ThousandEyes?
I clicked the link. I did not read it further. Did you?
Yeah, I did actually. They actually have a bunch of really useful information. You only have to give away your name, your email address, the company, and your firstborn child to get the PDF. Okay. But they've done an analysis on not just the cloud providers, but also major ISPs. And then they've got to dig a little deeper into some of the more specific services like the global accelerator and things like that. So it'd be a really good reference material if you need to make some kind of global deployment for an efficient network. It's a good place to start.
Neat.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting to see. I wonder how much of Google's improvement was just those dedicated lines they put underneath the ocean between those new regions.
Sure.
Just improving that latency on the Google backbone for some of those calls might be a humongous impact. You're talking about 1,000% improvement. Reliability between South Africa and Europe. That might sway the numbers just a little bit. That's my only thought about this data.
It is important, though, to point out things like inter-AZ latencies when they're talking about improvements from year over year between the providers.
Oh, sure.
But so AWS average latency between AZs was 0.8 milliseconds, which is not a lot. Google, GCP at least, was the same last year, and they've reduced that to about 0.5 this year. So we're talking about 0.3 milliseconds difference in latency between the two. It's not significant. Azure came in very slightly higher. But if your application requires a latency, on that order of magnitude, then this kind of optimizations it's not significant.
Well, I'm downloading the report as we speak.
Nice, yep. Love it, real time.
And I will take a look at it because I meant to do that before the show.
Reporting.
Yes, I will look into it because it's definitely intriguing. Google has acquired CloudSimple to bring more VMware workloads into its cloud. CloudSimple is a Santa Clara-based California. They're a startup we've talked about here many times on the show, which we'll get to in a minute. The startup software makes it possible to deploy VMware's vSphere hypervisor and related virtualization tools on GCP directly. Rich Sanzi, Google's cloud vice president of engineering, wrote in a blog post, "Many enterprises are using VMware in their on-premise environments to run a variety of workloads, business applications such as ERP and CRM, databases such as Oracle and SQL Server, development and test environments. With CloudSimple, our customers can migrate their VMware workloads from on-premise data centers directly into Google Cloud VMware solution by CloudSimple while also creating new VMware workloads as needed." The more interesting wrinkle is that CloudSimple is also the company that partnered with Azure to bring VMware to Azure. So I'm not sure what this means in the light of this acquisition, and there was no comment by either party, Google or CloudSimple, on what their future plans are for VMware on Azure. So that may become a bit of a gap for those of you using VMware on Azure with CloudSimple.
They've quickly quenched that service from Azure, haven't they? If they discontinue support for the Azure cloud,
it would be a pretty big blow. I would imagine that Azure might be begging VMware to take their money now versus being so exclusive to Amazon.
Such an interesting space, acquiring these companies that really created themselves on this concept of, more of a multi-cloud capability and then changing them to single cloud. Like, such a strategic move.
I mean, it's kind of like the ultimate anti-competitive behavior, really.
But it's totally competitive, right? I mean, this is how Google's going to catch up and make the cloud infrastructure space competitive.
I wonder how much of this will help them with Kubernetes when VMware gets Kubernetes on top of VMware working. And then Google can say, not only do we have GKE, but we also have VMware Kubernetes. So if you want best of both worlds, you get both.
I feel like it's going to be a bit of a muddle of services for the next couple of years before they finally sort themselves out. We've got VMware with Kubernetes. We've got Google. We have all the providers with the VMware support now. It's all kind of really. It seems kind of messed up.
It's just land grab. It's just land grab of workloads.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're they're not looking for the optimal technology solution. They're grabbing the resources and they'll figure it out later how to move them to their optimal product set.
Lift and shift from VMware on-premise to VMware in the cloud is probably not a sustainable way of doing a migration. Yeah, I guess it's just it's a foot in the door for whoever happens to own the technology.
Well, the Google Identity Platform has gone multi-tenant. You can now create and manage multiple tenants with a single instance of Identity Platform. Multi-tenancy allows you to create a unique silo of users and configurations within a single Identity Platform instance, and it's most commonly used for B2B apps to serve customers and partners. Each tenant will get its own unique identifier, users, identity providers, and auth methods, auditing and cloud IAM configuration, quota allocation, and identity platform usage breakdown. So this is making this a little bit more competitive with Cognito and some of the other technologies out there in the auth space.
This is multi-tenant as in tenants of Google customers, not.
Yes. So as a SaaS provider, you could use identity platform, and then you could basically have each of your customers have their own tenant space. So they have their own single sign-on provider. They can have their own users. But it's all tied to one organization and one system for authentication to your SaaS application.
It makes a ton of sense to outsource this. I mean, so undifferentiated, but I think just being here in the Bay Area, everybody has already built this. And so I think in other parts of the country, this is probably something that'll be adopted much quicker. And we're just in this weird base.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting because I think you've seen several startups kind of get really dominant by doing very niche-y things, but doing it better than you can do it. So think companies like Twilio and Auth0 that basically provide a very simple function, but they do it really well. So yes, a lot of companies have these capabilities, but if they didn't have to build these capabilities, that's resources they could put to something else and more feature innovation. And the ability for these services to support things on day one makes you potentially a big differentiator. So I know like Auth0 supported the new Apple authentication method day one when they first shipped it. So those type of things are big enablers that get you a whole new way to authenticate users with with OAuth and all the different technologies, but you don't have to do any work to make it happen. That's a pretty big enabler.
No, for sure.
And so I think while yes, there's a lot of companies in the Bay that probably have this capability or built it themselves, the ability to not have to manage this kind of code if you can get it for the right price for build versus buy, it makes sense. And so I can see why Cognito and Identity from these guys and AD365 is popular because of eliminating this requirement from your stack.
It's cool, and I'd like to see. In fact, not just like to see, but I think we'll see mass migration to federated logins for most internet services over the next couple of years. I think now Google and Facebook and Apple have their federated login services. There's absolutely no reason for anybody to have to manage their own list of user accounts and passwords and have to manage the risk of exposure of that kind of data when you could just trust somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah.
Microsoft has announced that Salesforce will migrate its marketing cloud to Azure. It's probably a large contract, although they didn't expose the details of the contract. The marketing cloud for Salesforce is, of course, a suite of advertising tools, analytics features, and related products that ranks as one of the most widely used toolkits in the marketing category. Salesforce doesn't break down the unit exact sales figure, but in August, the Marketing and Commerce Cloud e-commerce platform had a combined revenue of over $616 million. This is interesting because Salesforce does have competing products with Dynamics 365, and the Marketing Cloud do compete in those spaces. And Salesforce.com has been a big AWS customer as well as apparently GCP, which means it could have just as easily chosen one of those platforms, but might have done this for leverage on both AWS and GCP and to avoid that vendor lock-in. So this is an interesting announcement.
Do you really think they'd get enough leverage from AWS and GCP to offset the cost of managing a whole extra cloud?
I don't know. No. I don't know how much leverage you actually get by being on multi-cloud. I don't know that AWS really cares that you're using GCP or Microsoft. They think they're the biggest and the baddest, and so they don't need to worry about that, where Google cares and Azure really cares that you're using both because they want market share and they want you to start having good experiences on their clouds, then move it to the next platform.
Yeah, if everybody's already on AWS, the way you grab market share is by being the second cloud that they use, which means they have to be multi-cloud.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. I've talked to 4 or 5 different companies now that have made the decision to go to Google. And the reason that they used to go to Google was not because Google's technology was superior. They were, in each of those cases, they were very much interested in going to AWS. But through the sales process, Google comes in, has a much better enterprise sales team now. The partnership, they throw marketing dollars at the companies to get them to make that move. And at the end of the day, they're just getting outplayed. And AWS is just kind of caught flat-footed because they don't have a good way to engage with customers who don't spend money. They engage with you as a customer when you spend a lot of money. You get an enterprise account team, and you get these things. And they really rely on the partner network, which I know Foghorn does a great job on this, to help address this gap. But AWS really has got to figure out the companies that are $0 to $10,000 a month, like those customers will eventually be the $100,000 a month customers. But if you don't get them at 0, you're not going to get them ever. And I think that's the big risk that AWS has right now. And I don't know they quite understand that, because it's been amazing how much GCP has become a big topic of conversation in a lot of enterprises since TK got in there and they brought in SAP salespeople who have these relationships with these enterprises that didn't exist before.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny because that's where Amazon started, right? Their roots were the developers who were using very small workloads.
The problem now is I think the cloud is now a CTO decision or a CIO decision, and it's less about grassroots developers picking a platform that's kind of rebel and kind of gets them, innovative and all that kind of stuff. Now everyone's going to cloud, and so now it becomes a business conversation versus a developer-led initiative. And I think it's a risk. I don't know that they quite understand it yet. That's a sidetrack, but interesting nonetheless. GitHub Actions for Azure are now generally available again following the recent GitHub Actions general availability announcement. The Actions for Azure are quite numerous. There's connect and auth against Azure, deploy web apps, deploy serverless, build and deploy containerized apps, deploy to Kubernetes, deploy to Azure SQL or MySQL, trigger a run in Azure pipelines, several utility actions for variable substitutions in your scripts, and many more coming soon. So if you are super excited about GitHub Actions, again, Azure has you here as well with a lot of great out-of-the-box capabilities.
It's like they stealthily turned a CI tool into a CD tool.
It kind of feels that way.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
They're like, we want to do more than just CI. We want to do both.
It's so easy for them too. I mean, just look for a file in the repo, take actions on it every time there's a commit. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's really great. I'm super pleased.
I'd love to know if it was actually... is it a Microsoft initiative, or since they acquired GitHub, or was it always in the pipeline? I'm curious to know where the innovation actually came from.
I think GitHub Actions was in beta before the acquisition, or right around the time of the acquisition. And really, Microsoft didn't have a good build solution other than TFS. But that didn't, their CD is kind of limited.
A good build solution other than TFS. Okay, that's not how
I don't count TFS as a good build system. I mean, some people do.
I wouldn't
but
phrase
I
it like
don't.
that. The only experience I've had with TFS is people wanting to migrate to GitHub.
Yes, exactly. And then they just bought it. So your customers run away from you to a competitor, and then you just buy the competitor. It's a great play.
Yep.
It's well
so much
done.
easier.
But I also think they had to. I think GitLab, already had CI/CD capabilities kind of being built out into it, and I think the GitHub Actions was kind of a response really to GitLab, and I think it just helped. And Microsoft bought them to put more resources behind it. Well, if you are tired of spending money on Azure services, you can now reserve those resources to save a lot of cost savings. Now, the Blob Storage GPv2 and the Azure Data Lake Storage is available to you with a 38% discount if you're willing to purchase in 100 terabyte or 1 petabyte size blocks. You can save money on the Azure database for MySQL, Postgres, or MariaDB with a savings of over 51% on the DB offering. And you can exchange those reservations to move from a GP to a memory optimized or vice versa at any time after that purchase. The Azure Data Explorer now provides you a 30% discount if you're willing to reserve that capacity. And the premium SSD managed disks will save you a lovely 5% if you're willing to commit. So maybe not on that one. Maybe don't commit to that one. It's only 5%. But the other one's a pretty good savings.
So this is capacity reservation in addition to discounts, right? For committed spend.
Correct. You're committing to the reservation and then the cost savings.
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's good to see different options, different capabilities beyond just EC2 or instances and RDS or managed databases. It's good to see some other things you can start saving money on, because you can do those things on Amazon, but through special contracts and special amendments. You don't get them, as a global service you can buy with just a click of a button in the console. Yeah,
but Amazon at least have like tiered costing models for things like S3. The more you store, the more you save. So I guess they kind of have a similar thing, but they've obviously simplified that hugely with their savings plans.
All right, well, that's it for new news this week. Peter, take us to the lightning round, please.
Let's start off with Amazon Cloud Search. Provides an option to mandate HTTPS and the minimum TLS version.
Finally realized they have a service called Cloud Search, and it was like, oh, this isn't compliant. Fix it now.
I have no idea what Cloud Search is.
It's a search engine for your web product.
Okay.
No one used it before. That's why no one knows what it is.
I've never noticed that in the console.
Oh my God. It's a pretty old one too.
It's old, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Been around a long time. Yeah.
Crazy.
All right. We've got a GA announcement. Google Cloud Run. A managed Knative service.
All I can say is run.
Run from it.
Or run to it. One of the two. Whatever you prefer.
Amazon CloudWatch Metric Math now supports additional functions.
Finally. Maybe you can calculate how much it's going to cost you.
Ooh. I mean, I don't know about metric math. That sounds scary.
What, you don't often need to know the square root of the number of alerts?
Not normally.
We got to work square root into there somehow. Amazon RDS Performance Insight supports counter metrics on Amazon RDS for SQL Server.
As long as it's pulling the same WMI graphs that all the SQL Server tools use, then I'm okay with this feature.
AWS Cost Explorer now supports hourly and resource level granularity.
Because I couldn't divide my monthly cost by 744 and come up with an hourly cost.
But it costs money, right? You want the granularity, it's going to cost you.
No, but you're missing it. You could tell by the hour where you spent your money.
I can now tell by the second, not the hour. It's by the second I can now tell.
I don't care by the hour. I care how much it costs me at the end of the month. Like, the cost to do business shouldn't be per hour, right? Who cares if it's per hour? So your customers cost you more money to run your services during the day. Well, no anyway. But you have to pay extra for that service, though. You want that kind of granularity, you've got to pay extra per 1,000 resources, and it is the grand total of 1 cent per 1,000 resources.
It says here they give you hourly cost up to 14 days, so you can track the cost during nights or off-peak hours. So in case you didn't know what your auto-scaling was doing and cost, you can now filter it in a graph. There you go. You're welcome.
I guess they're going to start including this in the well-architected thing. You can use this to measure your scale down efficacy, I guess. But whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't think they should charge you for visibility into billing.
Foghorn built this in 2013.
You should have sold it to them.
You were ahead of your time.
Ahead of our time. Automate your operational playbooks with AWS Systems Manager. That sounds kind of old. Is that new?
It is. But you can now, not use Ansible, I guess, which is the better choice.
I like Ansible. Winner! Just the lowercase m is the winner.
You can now add Python or PowerShell scripts in combination with existing automation actions. Wow. Calling it Amazon APIs or running commands on your instances.
What could go wrong?
Why couldn't you do that before? Why would a playbook have not let you do those things before? I don't know.
Because the document language they chose to use for Systems Manager is kind of garbage.
Yeah.
And so I think they're trying to make up for some sins they did there.
Yeah, I think going for your own format for any kind of automation language at this point is kind of pointless. I love what they did with CDK and reverted back to a common language that everybody understands, which is Python. And I think they should do the same thing for all of their systems managers and all their automation platforms. Just use a language that everybody already knows. Don't build your own. No point.
I agree. Moving on, AWS Code Pipeline enables passing variables between actions at execution time.
We talked about last week, we should have a category of things that should have already been there. This would be a very clear contender.
I remember the first time I used Concourse CI, and I couldn't figure out how to do this, and it's because it didn't exist. It's like, no, you just stick them in a file and let the next thing read the file. I'm like, How could that not possibly be a feature embedded in the product?
I mean, a pipeline is like things move from one end to the other end. How can you just not let environment variables move from one end to the other end?
I'm telling you that these products didn't have it. It's so weird. It's the first thing I would have added as a feature request when I started building the product, 0.1.
Yeah, and relatively speaking, co-pipeline isn't that old either, so it's surprising that it had this gap.
Announcing EMR runtime for Apache Spark.
I'm happy about this, but the number of custom AMI runtimes that exist now is too high. Like, there's the ECS optimized, the EKS optimized, the EMR optimized, the machine learning optimized containers. Like, come on, can we just figure this out so that we can be more prescriptive about this with a single type of instance versus thousands of specialty ones?
Yeah, we need a Spark maker announcement at Reinvent, which just picks the right runtime.
Mm-hmm.
ECS container instances monitoring is now available in Amazon CloudWatch Container Insights.
I thought this was the same announcement from like 2 months ago when they first announced this, but I did not realize, because I only have 1 or 2 containers running and where I actually have this running, that they didn't give you the level of granularity into the specific host or specific container, which they now do. So again, a feature that should have been there at announcement time is now there in the CloudWatch Container Insights, which is actually a really awesome feature. If you haven't checked it out, I do recommend checking that one out. But I didn't quite realize the limitation because I don't have enough nodes to see it.
And be aware, and here I am being my usual negative self. It uses custom metrics, which cost you 50 cents per month each, so not free.
No, but it's what it gives you is awesome and worth the 50 cents per metric.
50 cents.
It
Come on,
adds up.
just pay the
It
50
adds up.
cents.
It does add up.
Cross AZ traffic is only 1 cent per gig, but it adds up. Everything adds up.
It does.
It's 50 cents. Come on.
It's only 50 cents. Yeah, yep. The first one's free. I can see it now.
The Amazon RDS for SQL Server now supports additional instance sizes.
Yay.
I'd love to understand why their model on the back end, why their implementation at least, requires particular size. I mean, I get like the small sizes may not be supported because there's not enough RAM or not enough whatever, not enough compute to make it viable. But why is there any limitation? Why isn't RDS like just an AMI that you can boot up at any instance and have it do its thing? The fact that they have separate instance classes and separate sizes and different support, it just blows my mind. Too complicated.
Too complicated. CloudFormation announces drift detection support in stack sets.
I'm super glad this came, but I don't know a lot of people using stack sets pretty heavily just because of some of the limitations that come into stack sets. But it seems like a feature that, again, should have been there with drift detection day one.
These are all very console-driven kind of activities, and it's not something that most people, I think, sort of do. Especially, the things they care about in production are not things that you're clicking through the console to deploy. So it's perhaps useful for like non-production environments, but
AWS Cost Explorer monthly forecasts now include support costs.
Thank goodness. Like, this is such a tax that you end up paying on your AWS bill as it grows. To not have it be forecasted or even visible in the Cost Explorer in any way was so annoying before. Now, the only complaint I have is that the organizational level, I like to distribute that cost across my accounts based on percentages, but baby steps.
Yeah.
So how would that work, though? Like, if only one of your accounts actually submitted support tickets, would you allocate the entire enterprise cost of support to that one account?
I mean, I would do it based on spend. So if this, the accounts that cost you more money, cost you more money in support. So that's how I would distribute it out. But that's just my.
It's a expensive barrier to entry, I think, for a lot of people. Is the business, even the business level support is pretty pricey.
But it's awesome when you have it.
Yes.
I don't see how you run a production workload on Amazon without business level support. I don't get it.
Well, I can see how you do it, but you shouldn't.
Yeah, that's just nuts. And the winner out of pure quantity of snark is Justin.
Of course. Justin 18 now. Guest 5. Last week sucked so bad, Peter. I almost gave the point to nobody. Oh, actually, if I recall, I tried to give the point to you even though you weren't there.
That would have been great.
Instead, it got allocated to the guest. So,
Yeah, the problem with doing a recording on a Saturday morning is that we're not quite awake enough, unfortunately. So that's how that works out. Well, great. We are excited to see you guys all coming up in reInvent. The next week's show will be the prediction show as usual and a special AWS only show. So we will be recording that here in like 10 minutes. But you guys get it a week later. So yeah, we're already aware of what we're talking about. So see you guys next week on the Cloud Pod.
Good night, everybody.
See you in 10 minutes.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel, go to our website, thecloudpod.net for sign-up instructions.